Okay, everybody. So we are going to start our night with the 4-H pledge. So if I can get everybody to join in the pledge with me. If you want to turn on your cameras for this, you can. But I want to, if you guys can all follow along at home, that would be fantastic. Make sure you stand and remove your hats, please.
Stop video means time.
Okay, we'll go. I pledge my head to clear thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, my country, and my world. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. That was great. I appreciate people joining in on the pledge. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. We'll just go through a few things before I pass it over to our presenters for the
9.
Hello.
Did you get rid of the 7?
No.
I never said 7.
Okay.
Here.
Hopefully everyone can see my
Get rid of that
screen
7.
here. Oh, someone is
6.
not.
Nope.
I can't see the participants, so I'm sorry if. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that and we're good. So welcome to the multi-species judging learning series. And we want to just send an extra special thank you to the Lakeland judging team who are here to help present. Okay, perfect. So I just want to touch on just another reminder that we do have the 4-H Provincial Judging Competition on March 11th. So if you haven't gone to check out and learn more about it, and you haven't registered, definitely go register to learn more and check it out. So it is on the 4-H website underneath member programs, but it's also, if you log into your registration system, it'll also be there, and you can go and learn more about it there. All this info that is on the slide will be there.
From the black tin? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and oops, sorry, I'm gonna move this over here. Okay, and here's some more info on the slide, but like I said, this will all be online too, so you can go look at this on the 4-H website or in the registration system. It'll be really fun. You won't know what you're going to judge until you get there, so don't even bother asking me because I do not know and I cannot tell you the answers. I'm sorry. I don't even know the answers, and that's honest. Okay, and then before we get going, I just want to thank our supporters. So we want to express our sincerest appreciation to our provincial partners and supporters for their investment and support of our program and for this series. So thank you to the Government of Alberta, who's our Diamond Clover sponsor. Thank you to Alberta Recycling, AltaLink, ATB, Calgary Stampede Foundation, CPA, and UFA, who are our Emerald Clover sponsors. Thank you to our Gold Clover sponsors, AFSC, PV Mart, Save On Foods, and thank you to our Silver Clover sponsor, Brand. Our Bronze Clover sponsors, Alberta Beef Producers, MCS Net, Bayer, Nutrien, Gas Alberta Inc., Viterra, thank you, and an extra special thank you to Lakeland College, who our presenters are from today. And also thank you to Bayer, who is also a 4-H Canada national partner. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to our Lakeland supporter or presenters who are here, which I believe is Kira Axley and Taylor, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll let you guys take it away.
All right, awesome. I'll share my screen. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint for this week?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, so like Maddie said, we're on week 3 of our judging webinars. This week we're going to be going over some terminology and some judging practice. And like Maddie had mentioned, I'm Kira Axley. I'm a second-year student at Lakeland College. I'm studying animal sciences, majoring in livestock production. I am still a 4-H member, so some of you may remember me from summer camps. I was a summer staff earlier in the summer and helped facilitate all the summer programs. And I am an ambassador for the East Central region. So I've kind of been there and done that in 4-H and have a strong passion for judging thanks to the 4-H program. I'm not sure if Taylor's on here yet to introduce herself.
I'm here.
Alright.
Hey guys, I'm Taylor Carlson. I am from Manitoba and I grew up in the 4-H program, showing steers and heifers and of course doing judging. So it's something that I've learned a lot of over the years, and I didn't used to enjoy it as much as I do now. So yeah, it's definitely something that's grown on me. Same thing as Kira. I'm a second-year student at Lakeland, studying beef science. So yeah, I'm excited to be here tonight.
Awesome. So we'll get started. Maybe. There we go. So we already went through the pledge, so we don't need to worry about that. So tonight we're going to be going through some animal part terminology. So we have quite a few different species of animals that we're going to cover some basic parts so that when you look at an animal and you are going to be writing reasons on why you placed animal number 3 over animal number 2, you kind of have the correct terminology to use based on kind of its animal parts, based on their anatomy. So that can help you out a little bit. And then we also have 2 practice judging classes just so that we can get experience going through putting together our thoughts and kind of telling everyone why we placed one animal the way we did and what we liked about one animal in comparison to the other. So we'll start off with some animal part terminology. So here we have a beef heifer, and we're going to go through and kind of get you guys to tell us each of these points. So who knows what point number 1 is on this heifer? Just unmute yourself and you can blurt it out.
Rump.
Yeah, not quite. You're close though.
Looks like the rump, but it looks more like the hip, hip or knee on a horse.
The
More
tailhead?
familiar horse.
Yeah, so number 1 is the tailhead. So yeah, your tailhead sits just on top of your rump or your hip, whichever you prefer to call it. When we're going through and judging, we want a tailhead that sits level with our top line. So this heifer, you can see her tailhead blends nicely into her hip and into her top. What about number 2? Who knows what number 2 is?
It's the top line.
Yeah, that's right. So when we're judging any animal, any beef animal, whether it's a steer, a bull, a heifer, a cow, anything like that, you want an animal that has a very strong top line, so that you know that she has a lot of longevity in her profile to allow her to carry that calf well or that bull to get out and travel well, or even your 4-H steer for that matter. You really want a strong top line so that he can stay sound while he packs on all those pounds. Does anyone know what number 3 is?
The neck. Brisket.
Yeah,
Neck.
number 3 is the neck. So yeah, your brisket's down here in front of the front legs. So we're looking just a little bit higher up. And when we're going through kind of our anatomy of a beef cow and looking at kind of their structure and kind of judging them based on that, you want a neck that is fairly clean cut. You want their neck to be a little bit longer than maybe in this photo, just so that they have that balance and that neck extension to really allow their shoulders to move freely. Like I said, you want it to be clean cut. You don't want it to be super wasty, especially in your butcher animals, because all that just goes in the garbage once they get processed for meat that we're all going to eat. So we want to make our animals as least wasty as possible, so that the amount that we are paying for the processor to give us all our nice steaks, we're not having to pay a lot more to get all that waste carried away, and we're just paying for mostly our usable products. So what's number 4? Does anyone know what point number
Udder.
4 is?
Udder.
Udder.
Flank.
Flank, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, your fore is your flank.
I said flank.
And when we're looking at animals and judging them based on their flank, we're wanting an animal that carries a lot of depth to their flanks. We don't want their flank to be really cut up because then that's going to take away from our depth of body. And we really want a lot of depth within our animals so that they can, if they're show steers, they can pack on a lot of pounds, or if they're bulls, they can really carry a lot of muscling through their middle and into their hind end. And depth of body is just something that we really like to idolize in animals. So when we're looking at depth of body, we can look in two places, in their heart girth and their flank, which is number 4. So who knows what number 5 is?
Shoulder. Shoulder.
Quite.
Stomach. Chest.
Not quite. One more guess.
Breast. Ribs. Heart girth. Ribs. Shoulder.
Not quite. Number 5 is
Breast.
our heart girth. So our heart girth sits just below our
Breast.
shoulders. And when we're talking about heart girth in cattle, we want them to show a lot of depth and dimension throughout their heart girth as well. So just like we said with our flank, we want them deep in our flank. We want them to also carry that depth through their heart girth. We also want to see a little bit of expansion through their heart girth. So we want them to carry width throughout their sides when you get in behind them to look there. So now, what's number 6? Some of you guys said it was
Brisket. Brisket.
not quite. Brisket is a little bit further.
Shoulder.
Yeah, number 6 is your shoulder. It's a little bit lower, but it's kind of showing you where the point of the shoulder is. And when we're looking at our shoulders in cattle, we want them to be very smooth shouldered, especially in heifers and breeding bulls, so that they provide a little bit of calving ease. Also, if you're looking at show animals, so your show steers, your show heifers, you really want to idolize a smooth shoulder just to, again, add that eye appeal into their presence. What about number 7? Who knows what number 7 is?
Stomach. Underline.
Underline.
Yeah, your underline.
Is it the foreline?
So number 7 is your underline. So just like your top line, you have an underline in cattle. And when we're talking about our underline, we again want that to be really strong. So they're not dipping way down or they're not cut up so that they're really shallow. We want to see a lot of depth between our top line and our underline. And just like when we talked about cleanness in our front end throughout our neck, we also want our underline to be fairly clean cut as well, so that we don't have a ton of waste. Especially when we're talking about bulls or steers, we want their sheath or their navel to be fairly clean cut and tucked up with their underline as well. And same with heifers, we don't want them, some heifers can get a lot of extra skin in where their navel used to be. So we want that underline to be very clean. So it's kind of one straight line that provides a lot of eye appeal. All right, does anyone know what number 8 is?
Leg.
Yeah, so number 8 is the hawk. So yeah, when we're talking about kind of leg structure in cattle, that's something very important, and we often look at legs quite a bit in breeding animals.
Okay.
So when we're looking and evaluating an animal based on its leg structure, we want to see if there's any extra curvatures or bone development in that hawk that might reduce their soundness, that isn't just their normal joint structure. So that's one area that you can look at structural soundness for when evaluating our legs. You can also evaluate an animal's structural soundness based on like their leg curvature. So if they're straight or too curved in, they might be post-legged, and you'll see that a little bit in their hawk if they don't have enough flexion going down into their lower leg. What about number 9, the last item to label on this?
Hoof. U-claw.
Ankle.
What? Hoof.
What's just above their hoof?
Hoof.
No. So number 9 is just sitting just above their hoof, and that's their pastern. So that's kind of like your ankle or your wrist, and then your hock would be like your knee or your elbow. So pasterns are something very important to look at when we are, again, evaluating an animal's structural soundness. An animal you can see a lot of animals' faults or weaknesses in their pastern structure when you're watching them walk or when you see them set up like this heifer is. You can see them sitting, that their pasterns might be a little bit weaker if they're sitting kind of back more on their feet and they have a lot of curvature throughout their leg, or they might kind of bow out in their pasterns, or like I said earlier with their hock, they might have a few extra bone pieces in there, maybe playing a little bit of a detriment to their structural soundness in their bone development. So is there any questions on these beef cattle parts? No? Okay, we'll move on then to the next animal. So these 9 areas are kind of the 9 major areas that you should focus on evaluating or talking about when judging a beef cattle. So now we're going to talk about sheep. So sheep are fairly similar to cows, except for they have quite a bit more wool, and there's a few other areas that we like to consider and talk about in our reasons. So who knows what number 1 is representing?
Neck.
Neck. Throat.
Oh, so number 1 is representing their throat.
Throat.
And just like we said, kind of with the beef, we want them to be very clean in their front end, and especially in sheep, you want to kind of look at their throat latch and see how their head is blending into their neck, so that they maybe don't have a ton of waste up there, because like I mentioned earlier, we are having to pay to get all that waste taken away. So just look at how well their head blends into their neck and if there's any extra flush there. What about number 2? What's number 2? Does anyone know?
Stomach.
Not quite. What's a little bit before the stomach?
Chest.
The breast.
Chest.
Yeah, so 2, kind of like the chest. It's the breast in this photo, but yeah, you guys aren't wrong when you're saying the chest. So when evaluating a sheep, you want to look, so you want them to be wide throughout their chest or wide through their breast. You also, if you're judging market lambs, you want them to carry a little bit of muscling into that breast muscle, just because you're going to get quite a bit of meat from there. But you also don't want them to be wasty up there either. What do we think number 3 is?
Hock. Knee.
Yeah,
Knee.
number 3 is the knee. Your hock is on your back end, and the knee is what we kind of call that joint on the front end. So again, just like we were talking about with our hock, we want our knees to be very structurally sound as well. We don't want our knees to kind of bow out or kind of cause a lot of curvature, because that's going to interfere with our structural soundness. We want them to be kind of fairly straight, just like in this photo, so that they are able to get out in the fields and travel, to eat all the grass and gain weight, or hold up the rest of their body when they're gaining weight as we're feeding them to finish. Who knows what number 4 is?
Shoulder. Back.
Yeah, number 4 is the shoulder.
Shoulder.
So just like we said with beef cows, it's very important that we have smooth shoulders as well, especially in our breeding animals, because that, again, will allow the lambs to be born a little bit easier if they don't get stuck at their shoulders when they're being born. We also want their shoulders to be very smooth if you're kind of having show animals, so that they kind of look look really nice and they appeal to your eye. So that's another area that we can evaluate our sheep on. Who knows what number 5 is?
Top line.
The
Top
back.
line.
Yeah. So yeah, top line or back. It's labeled as the back in this photo. So especially in sheep, it's very important that their back is very strong and straight. We can accept a little bit of a curvature in beef cattle's top line, but for sheep, we want them to be very strong backed, and that is something that a lot of judges will critique on if your lamb kind of has a little bit of a sway in its back. So we want to make sure that they're very strong across their top. What about number 6? Who knows what number 6 is?
Top line. Deep top line. Top line.
Loin, yeah, someone said it. So this is something that is very specific to sheep. So when you're judging sheep, you're going to talk a lot about their loin, and you're going to be really focused on their loin. So with sheep, the loin area is kind of where you get a lot of your meat products from. So you want their loin to be very long. So what you're actually going to do is you're going to take your hands and you're going to actually go in and feel how long their loin is. Maybe you can only fit 2 fingers between their ribs and their hip bones, and so then you will say that sheep's loin isn't very long. But if you can fit your whole hand in between those bones and really get a good grasp of their loin, they're going to be pretty long throughout that loin. You also want that loin to be very wide across the top. So again, while you're feeling your loin area, you're gonna kind of try and go and stick your hands in their wool and feel how wide or how long it is between their ribs and their hip bones. But then you're also gonna see how close together you can get your thumbs. So you're gonna see maybe your thumbs don't touch across their back, and maybe you're overlapping your thumbs. So then you can kind of tell how wide your sheep is between its loin as well. So the loin area is kind of just behind the ribs and in front of your hind end, your hip bones there. So you can really comment a lot on that animal's loin, and that's something that a lot of judges will look for. Who knows what number 7 is?
Tailhead.
Tailhead.
Yeah, someone said it. It's the rump. So again, just like we're all familiar in our beef cattle, rump structure is something that's very important again for meat production. You want to see a lot of muscling in that rump, and you want to see quite a bit of length and depth through that rump area, so that you know that you are going to be getting quite a bit of meat from there. What about number 8? Who knows or has an idea what 8 is?
Tailhead.
Dock. That's just kind of like your pin bones in your animals. That's just another area that judges will look for in market ads, especially to see kind of how much they have developed in that area. What about number 9? Who knows what number 9 is?
Muscle bone. Tail? Butt? Tail?
No.
I don't know.
No, not quite. So it might seem a little odd that we have leg labeled way up here, but big part, again, just like your loin, that judges will look at and comment on, and that's something that is very heavily evaluated in your leg of lamb. So when we're looking at your ideal sheep, you want a sheep that has a lot or a very large leg of lamb. So that's kind of where a lot of your muscling is going to be, and a lot of your meat is going to come from. So you want a lot of definition and development in that area. So you want them to be very wide when you're getting behind them in that leg of lamb area, and also very deep in that area. So who knows what number 10 is?
The hawk.
Yes, it's the hawk. Same thing that we kind of talked about with our beef animals. We want to see a lot of structural soundness in that area. What about 11?
Knee? Cannon bone?
Not quite. We already went over a knee. What do we think number 11
Ankle.
is?
Thigh.
So number 11, not quite. We're just a little bit higher than our pasterns. Number 11 is our cannon bone. So again, especially within breeding stock, we want that cannon bone to be very strong, very straight, and not really curved in or out, so that our sheep is going to be very structurally sound, and so that we don't compromise any performance within our animal if they're not strong enough to kind of carry all the weight we're wanting to carry while we're finishing them, or maybe they won't be structurally sound enough to go out and walk all our pastures when they're grazing our grass. What's number 12? Yeah, so some of you are saying it's the pastern. So same, just like with our beef cow, we want them to be very strong throughout their pasterns. We don't want to see weak pasterns, so we don't want to see them kind of walking down on their heel too much. So we really want to see a lot of strength throughout our pastern. One last term to uncover, and who wants to guess what 13 is?
Flank. The udder.
Yeah, so 13 was your flank, and just like your beef cattle, you want them to be very deep throughout their flank, and you can kind of again feel in there for some to see how much fat they kind of deposited if it's a market lamb, but we're mainly looking at how much they carry their depth of body down into. Any questions about our sheep term?
Nope.
Questions on our sheep? Awesome.
Nope.
All right, so now we're gonna jump into swine. So we're gonna start at the ground up for swine. And who wants to guess what part number 1 is? Pasture. Yeah, so again, same concept, same ideas that we're wanting to evaluate a pig on as our sheep and our cows is strong pasterns that they can carry themselves throughout their life. What's number 2, do we think?
Knee.
Yeah, your knee. Good job. So same thing, like we talked about earlier. We're not going to see any extra curvature or bone formation in there, so that they present to be very structurally sound. Who can guess what number 3 is?
Muscle. Yeah, throat latch.
Kind of their throat latch. So in sheep we call it their jowl. It's kind of their chin, kind of their throat latch area. So when we're judging hogs or market hogs or breeding hogs, any type of pig, we want to really look at their jowl and see how clean cut they are through there. We want to see how well their cheeks, their chin kind of blend into their neck. We don't want to see a lot of extra flesh pooling in that area, just because that can kind of hint to them being a little bit more waisty. And they again just won't be nearly as eye appealing. So we want them to be fairly clean and well formed through their jowl. What about number 4?
Eye.
Neck.
Throat.
Neck.
Yeah, your neck. So just like our sheep and our cattle, we want to see them a little bit clean throughout their neck. So we don't want a lot of extra waste. And we also want to see a little bit of extension throughout their neck so that we can kind of get, again, a little bit more product through there. So if that's our neck, let's move a little bit further back in the body. Who wants to guess what number 5 is?
Boy.
Yeah,
Rib.
so someone said it's their loin. And just like sheep, you're going to really look here because you're going to get a lot of meat from this area again. And you want to see a lot of length throughout their loin. You also want to see that they're very wide across their top in their loin area. So that's another area that you can critique pigs on as well. Who knows what number 6 is?
Rump.
Yeah, your rump. So just like when you're talking about kind of your market steers or anything like that, you're going to want to consider how much muscle they have in their rump, because that's going to give you a lot of nice roast. and a lot of good good products to eat. So you're gonna kind of see how long they are through their rump, how much curvature they have, how much muscle definition they carry in that area. And you also want to see a lot of width across their rump as well. Who can tell me what number 7 is?
Leg.
Yep. Leg. Thanks.
Not quite. So it's kind of like your leg of lamb if you're looking at sheep, but this area kind of just below their rump is called their ham. So if any of you like eating ham for Christmas or for Easter or Thanksgiving, this is where it's going to come from. So kind of that lower third on the hip of a pig or the hind end of a pig. And again, we want to see a lot of muscle definition put into that area so we can get a very large ham for our very tasty suppers. We also want to see them to be very thick throughout in between their hams when you get in behind them so that you can see if they have put in a lot of muscle definition in that area. Who knows what number 8 is?
Leg. Is it the pig?
A hawk.
Not quite. So this is so number 8 is our stifle joint. And when we're looking at our stifle joint, that's not really as talked about in sheep or cattle as much as is in our pigs. But again, we just want to see how much muscling and definition they carry down into that stifle joint to show that they are very deep, not only in their middle, but also in their hind end. So if you want to comment on how much muscling a pig has within their rump or their ham, you can credit them to carrying that muscle definition or that muscle quality down into their stifle region. So that's kind of just below their ham, kind of before you get down into their actual leg. So who wants to guess what number 9 is?
Hawk. Hind leg.
It's your hawk again, and same thing. You just want to make sure that they're very correct in their structure there, and they're not showing any extra curvature or any negative bone formation there that won't allow these pigs to gain a lot of weight and grow out a lot of product for us. So who can guess what number 10 is?
Flank.
Yeah, so someone said it. It was your flank. So you have a foreflank, which is kind of their armpit area behind their shoulder here. And then you have a rear flank, which just like we highlighted in our sheep and our cows, is kind of just in front of their hind leg. So again, you want to see that our pigs carry a lot of depth into our flanks as well. You want them to carry these flanks quite low so that we can see that they are very deep bodied and that we are going to get a lot of products from them. Who can guess what number 11 is?
Joint.
Not quite. So it's our elbow. So just kind of like our normal elbow, it's a little bit above our knee, and it's basically just another joint. However, kind of your elbow formation in pigs is fairly important just because they do carry a lot more product, a lot more muscle mass up throughout their neck and their shoulders. So we want to make sure that that elbow is tucked nicely up in our side and that our elbows aren't going out, kind of giving them a little bit of maybe an incorrect structure because their weight won't be carried directly down into their knee and their pastern into their hoof. So they're going to have kind of uneven weight distribution, so they won't be able to carry quite as much weight. All right, so is there any questions on evaluating swine or anything about their anatomy and how they're put together?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Awesome.
No. No.
All right, so we're gonna get into our horses now. So horses are a little bit more tricky than our cows or our sheep or our pigs, just because they have a few more areas to look at. So who can tell me what number 1 is?
Pasture.
The hoof.
Yeah, so you can call it pasture, or when we're talking about
Is it the
our,
cat?
yeah. So when we're talking in
Oh,
terms of our cat or our horses, we want to call it the fetlock. It's called pastern in every other species except for our horses. So it goes with the same kind of rules as looking at this joint in any other of our livestock species. We just want to see a lot of structural correctness in that area, and that we see the correct flexion in that joint when they're walking for us. You can tell us what number 2 is.
The hawk.
Yeah, so that's our hawk again, the same concept as in our beef cattle and every other species we've talked about so far. We just want to see a lot of structural correctness in that area. Who can tell me what number 3 is?
Rump.
Rump.
Gaskin.
So number 3 is your gaskin. So
Gaskin.
that's just another area that a horse is gonna kind of develop a lot of muscle. And muscle definition in our gaskin is very important because these are working animals. So we're gonna need a lot of muscle throughout their hind ends so that they can run across the field to chase that cow, or if we're maybe using them for sport and they have a lot of power to run out of that roping box and rope that steer and then sit down on their hind end while we go and tie it up, that kind of thing. So we want to see them to have a lot of muscle definition throughout their gaskin. And we want to also look from behind to see how wide they are throughout their gaskin muscle as well, to show us how structurally sound they are and how much performance they could potentially deliver for us. Who knows what number 4 is?
Barrel.
So that's our barrel. So that's kind of the middle of the animal. We want to see them to kind of carry a lot of depth to their barrel, just so that kind of they are balanced. So one area that we can really tell an animal's balance and how well put together they are is seeing how if the barrel of a horse is the same size as its hip and the length of its neck. So we really want to consider an animal's barrel shape when looking at their overall structural balance. Who can tell me what number 5 is?
Withers.
Yeah, so your 5 is your withers. And that is kind of where your saddle sits. That's what keeps your saddle on the horse. So we want those to be very well structured. We want them to be very low, so we don't want to have a really hard time kind of figuring out where their withers are, because then we won't have a lot to keep our saddle on, and we might just roll left and right while sitting on the back of the horse. We also don't want those withers to be too tall, because it'll be very hard to fit our saddle on that horse then. Same thing, you kind of want to look from behind the horse to see how much width they carry throughout their withers. If their withers are very wide, they have maybe a lot of extra condition pooling up there, that's kind of less than ideal again, just because it'll be harder to fit your saddle. Who knows what number 6 is?
The jawline.
Yeah, your throat latch. Good job. So when looking at the throat latch of a horse, again, we want that to be very clean, just like in our pigs, just so that they don't have a lot of extra skin or flesh there that might interfere with the animal's movement. A clean throat latch also plays a huge part into a horse's eye appeal and overall balance. If they have a lot of extra flesh throughout their throat latch, they might seem really thick throughout their neck, which will be less desirable than if a horse was really clean throughout their throat latch. Who can tell me what number 7 is?
Chest.
Shoulder.
Yeah, your shoulder. So shoulder structure is something very important in horses. That slope of your shoulder from your withers kind of throughout your shoulder. You want a nice sloping line there so that that also proves structural soundness. And it allows your horses to get out and move and run freely. So if your shoulder is positioned too upright, the horse won't have nearly as long of a stride or won't be able to move out as freely. So you really want to look at that sloping throughout the shoulder, and also consider your shoulder structure and how big of a shoulder that horse has compared to their hip structure, and then again their barrel. So who can guess what number 8 is?
Knee.
So that's your knee. So same, just like with every other animal, you just look there to see if there's any poor curvature in that area or any extra bone that will interfere with soundness. Who can tell me what number 9 is?
Cannon.
Yeah, so just like we talked about in our sheep, that's our cannon bone. That's another very important bone within a horse's structure. So we really want to evaluate that bone to see if it's straight. There's a lot of horses that might show or might lack straightness throughout their cannon bone, which will again interfere with their structural soundness, as they aren't able to distribute that weight straight from their top all the way down straight throughout their leg into their hoof. So you really want to look to see how straight that cannon bone is. Who knows what number 10 is? Yeah, faster. Good job. So again, in horses, this is again really important. You can often see some horses, they'll get a bit of extra bone development in there, which is less than ideal, just because there's a lot of extra material in there that might hinder that joint movement. So we just want to see how well put together that joint is and look at its flexion when that animal gets out on the move to see if they have a lot of flexion, or maybe they might be very stiff in that joint's movement. Who can tell me what number 11 is?
Yes.
Girth?
Yeah, it's your girth. So that's kind of right where your cinch is going to go when you're saddling your horse. We want to see them to carry quite a bit of depth between their withers and their girth, so that they again have that lung capacity. When they're deep throughout their girth, they provide a lot more room for all their organs to be functioning in there, and especially our lungs, since we're often using horses to go really fast and do a lot of work, we want them to be able to get a lot of air throughout their body. So we just want to see a lot of depth throughout their girth area. And one last one, who can tell me what 12 is?
Flank.
Not quite. So your flank is a little bit before that, but in horses, we don't really consider your flank area much, but we're looking more at our stifle region. So we kind of talked a little bit about the stifle in a pig and how they want a lot of muscle definition there. That same goes for a horse. You want to look for a lot of muscle definition throughout that stifle region. Similar reason we want muscle definition in our gaskin, just so that it kind of shows us that that horse has enough power in its hind end to run across the field, or to kind of drag that cow or that calf at the roping pen, and just allow them to really have a lot of muscle development throughout their hind end, because muscle development in horses is very crucial. So is there any questions on our horse terminology?
No.
I have a question.
Okay, what's your question?
No.
Gaskin's supposed to be lower.
No.
It can be a little bit lower, yeah. So it can be kind of just a little bit lower. Our arrow's kind of pointing to just the top of the gaskin. So kind of anywhere in that lower third of the hip is kind of where your gaskin is, as long as you're not getting down into your leg too far.
What
Yeah,
is the
you're right.
multi-species judging learning series for?
All right, so we're gonna get into our dairy parts now. And dairy cattle are a little bit more complicated to judge. They have a lot more parts that we need to consider. just because they are such highly functioning animals.
There are 21 parts.
So who can tell me what number 1 is?
Pastern?
Yep, so it's our pastern. So same thing with all our other animals, just considering structural soundness and bone development in that area. Who can tell me what number 2 is?
Udder.
Yeah, so it's labeled as your foreudder, but yeah, it's pointing just kind of at the front end of that cow's udder. Good job. What about number 3?
Back udder. But
Yeah,
Milk
so your rear udder. When we're looking at kind of a dairy cow's udder, that's one of the most important areas we want to critique a dairy cow on. And we want to see them to be very smooth throughout their foreudder. And we also want them to be very smooth throughout their rear udder. Specifically in their rear udder, we want them to carry or demonstrate a lot of width through there so that they present a large milking capacity. Who can guess what number 4 is?
Flank.
gas.
Not quite. So number 4 was our stifle. So kind of just like our horses and our pigs, they do have a stifle here. And that is where a dairy cow can maybe show a little bit or a lack of structural soundness if they aren't very smooth throughout their stifle. We also want them to kind of carry a lot of depth into their stifle so that they show kind of a large body capacity. Who can guess what number 5 is?
Tail.
Not quite. What's beside the tail?
Tailhead.
Not quite. So number 5 is our rear udder attachment. So it's still pointing at the udder. And udder attachment is very crucial for dairy cows. So we want to make sure that in our rear udder, it's attaching as high up in the cow's hind end as possible so that we again present that large milking capacity. We also want them to be very smooth and correct throughout their rear udder attachment. And we again want to see a lot of width throughout their rear udder as well. So you kind of want to see them attaching as high up to their tail head or their hind end area as possible, just so we have a large milking capacity. Who can guess what number 6 is?
The rubber.
Is it the pin?
Yeah, your pin bone. Good job. So kind of your hip structure specifically, like your bones that make up your hip is something you really want to consider in dairy cattle. So you want your pin bone kind of correctly placed. So your pin bone is kind of behind your tail head. And you kind of want to see some definition throughout all your hip bones in a dairy cow. So who can guess what number 7 is?
Tailhead.
Tailhead.
Rump.
Yeah, so that's your tailhead. And same thing like we mentioned with our beef cow, we want that to blend in very nicely to our top line as well. Who can guess what number 8 is?
Rump. The rump.
Rump. Not quite. So we have a special word for this area. It's our thurl. Yeah, so we want to see a lot of fullness and development throughout our thurl. And you kind of just take that all into consideration when you're looking at a dairy cow's hind end to see if she's kind of put together correctly. So who can guess what number 9 is?
Loin. Hip.
Not quite. So that is our hook bone. So our hook bone is placed before our tail head and our pin bone is placed behind our tail head. And our hook bone and our pin bone kind of always go together. So you always want to look at those two. And you want to see a nice slope going from their hook down to their pin bone. So we can see that our hook bone is kind of attached a little bit higher up to our top line and our pin bone is dropped a little bit. And you really want to see a nice sloping angle from your hooks to your pins to really help with calving ease and also to promote structural soundness. So who can, now going kind of to the bottom side of this cow, who can tell me what number 10 is?
Is it
Udder.
the
4 udder attachment.
So yeah, it's pointing at our teats. And teat structure and placement is something that's very important in a dairy cow, again, because their main purpose is milk production. You want 4 teats, of course, and you want them to be placed kind of in the center of that quarter. So a dairy cow has 4 quarters in its udder, and you want those teats to be placed kind of center in each of those quarters. And you also want the teats to kind of be all the same size, and not have any extra texture that might cause some problems with the milking machine. Who can guess what number 11 is?
Canon Bone?
Hawk.
Someone said it. Yeah, your hawk. So something that a lot of judges will specifically comment on is the smoothness or flatness of a dairy cow's hawk. So like I'm sure we all know, dairy cow, they don't have a ton of hair. They're kind of really slick and they're really fine bone. And it's very important that dairy cattle legs are what we call smooth. So don't want to see a lot of extra bone development or too heavy of bone development in their legs. And that's an area that we really consider their bone density and how smooth they are through their bone development is in their hawk. Who can tell me or guess what number 12 is?
4 udder attachment.
Yeah, good job. So
4 udder attachment.
when we're considering our 4 udder attachment, we talked about our rear udder attachment. We want it to be really smooth and high. We also want our 4 udder attachment to be smooth and long. So we want it to kind of attach, want our udder to attach kind of as far under our cow as possible to increase that milking capacity. And we want to make sure that it attaches very smoothly. We don't want a lot of extra skin or flesh there that kind of just take away from our eye appeal. How about number 13? Who can guess what 13 is?
Flank
Their
or
tummy.
the
Breast.
milk wells?
So number 13 was representing our mammary veins. So if any of you have seen a dairy cow that is heavy in lactation, so milking a lot, you'll see on their underline that they have a lot of milk veins, and that just shows kind of how heavy they're milking. If a cow maybe isn't milking as heavily, they won't have as defined milk veins. So that's just a hint so you guys kind of know what you're looking at when you see kind of the underside of a dairy cow. Who can guess what number 14 is?
Shoulder.
Any guesses?
Flank. Shoulder or the flank? Brisket. Brisket.
Well, not quite the brisket. The brisket is kind of in front of the hind leg. So our arrow is kind of pointing behind the front leg and it's kind of hinting to the chest floor. And we want a dairy cow to be kind of wide through her chest floor so that she is, again, increasing that capacity through her middle, just so that she has enough room to really allow all her organs to be working, and that also contributes to our structural soundness. Who can guess what number 15 is?
Brisket.
Not quite. It's a little bit high for our brisket. Not quite.
Points of shoulder.
So 15
ribs.
was our 4 ribs.
One I don't have.
So when we're looking at our 4 ribs, we want to see a lot of kind of roundness throughout our and also for them
Belly, stomach.
to contribute to our overall capacity again, because we really idolize a dairy cow that is very large in its capacity, so that we know that she's able to allow for a lot more growth and performance. There's a lot more room in there for all her organs to be working and for her to kind of put all those organs to work to kind of use up our feed. So we want to see an animal that's really deep through our 4 ribs, as well as have a lot of that round dimension there as well. Who can guess what number 16 is?
Paint of shoulder.
Brisket.
Points
Yeah,
of
so what we
shoulder.
said in the brisket
We're finished.
And kind of like we said with our other animals, we don't want a lot of waste throughout our brisket or throughout our front end, mainly for eye appeal purposes in our dairy cow. So we just want to see that she's really tucked up throughout that brisket. Who can guess what number 17 is?
17 is point of shoulder.
Not quite. So it's our
Dewlap.
dewlap. So brisket is kind of between the front legs, and then our dewlap is just a little bit higher. And that just shows another area that we want to consider when looking at how clean fronted an animal is. Who can guess what 18 is?
Throat. Point of shoulder.
Yeah, that's our point of shoulder. Good job. So we really want to consider a dairy cow's shoulder shape. We really want them to be smooth throughout their shoulder. And like we mentioned earlier, dairy cows are kind of made to be fine bone. We don't want them to be really heavy in their shoulders because that will give them an odd look if they're heavy in their shoulders but still carry that fineness throughout their hind end. You can tell me what 19 is.
Throat.
Yeah, it's your throat. So,
Is it throat?
yeah, it's our throat. So we kind of like we talked about with our horses, we want them to be clean throughout that throat area. Same with our pigs. A dairy cow's head shape is also something that we really consider when judging horses. So we want them to carry kind of a lot of cleanness throughout their throat just to give them that really feminine composure and that really feminine clean cut look. Who can guess what 20 is?
Is 20 back or heart girth?
Not our heart girth.
Crest. Wither.
So 20 was pointing to our wither, so that's kind of the top end of our shoulder. And we want to see a lot of levelness through a dairy cow's withers to again just show how structurally sound she is over her top. Who can guess the last one, 21?
Heart girth. Is it
Yeah, your heart girth. So again, just kind of like we've been talking about all the other animals, we want them to be very deep throughout their heart girth and show a lot of depth of body in that heart girth area, as well as to carry some good dimension and shape throughout that heart girth area so that they have enough room throughout their front end for their lungs and their heart to be fully functioning. So is there any questions on dairy cattle?
No.
Is there an easier way to
That I
get
have.
a steer
Nope.
like that?
Okay, sounds good.
Can I leave yet?
All right, so that is kind of all the livestock we're gonna go over now. So Taylor has put together 2 example classes. I think we're gonna run through maybe just the one, but we have this set of beef heifers here. And using what we all learned today and throughout the past 3 weeks, we're gonna judge them, and you guys are gonna practice writing some reasons, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what you guys like about each animal. So if you want to go through and we'll look at each 4 and kind of write down a few pointers, what you like about each one and place them 1, 2, 3, and 4. So pick out your first place animal and your second place animal, and all the way down to your 4th place animal. So we'll give about, we'll say 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes to go through, and you guys can place them, place each animal the way you think it should be, and then come up with some ideas on what you think placed each animal above the other. And then Taylor and I will also give some reasons. So you have till about 8:10, 8:15, and then we'll come back and we can share our reasons. Any questions on that?
No.
All
Where is
right,
it?
so go through, look at the 4 beef heifers, place them, and then kind of come up with some reasoning on why you placed them the way you did.
Where is the slide to do it?
Excuse me, we went over time.
Yeah, we started a bit late, so we'll just wrap up with this slide and go over judging reasons.
I put one over all of them because she looks a little deeper.
Let's just
longer.
wait until 8:10 and then we can share our reasonings.
Okay.
Yeah, we went over time.
We have about 2 more minutes and then Taylor will tell us how she placed these heifers, and we can discuss a little bit on how everyone else placed our heifers.
We start. No.
Can we start now? Can we start now?
All right, guys, so before you guys all share your reasons, I'll start by going through mine. And just remember that when you're judging a class, like it's completely your own opinion. And yeah, so there's not really a wrong answer when you're doing something like this. So I placed this class of beef heifers 1, 4, 2, 3. The first placed heifer is a female that I think shows a deeper chest floor and length of rib than the other heifers in this class. And she can also be appreciated for her foot and leg structure. Heifer number 4 is a female that I appreciate for a strong top line as well as a feminine front end. My bottom pair of heifers are the number 2 and 3 females. The heifer I used in 3rd place holds a lot of muscle definition, and in my opinion, she's going to make a great producer in the future. My last place heifer today is heifer number 3. I'd like to see some more depth of body and rib in this female in order to compete with the heifers above her today, but overall, it was a really great class of females. So, would anybody like to share their placings and why they did it?
Yes. May I?
Yeah, we'll start one at a time if we can. Sure. Somebody has their hand up. Alia and Daniel, do you guys want to go first?
You keep stopping me.
I placed this class 2, 1, 4, 3. I placed 2 over 1 because 2 has a longer neck and shinier coat. I placed 1 over 4 because it is deeper in the body. I placed 4 over 3 because 4 is smoother through the body. I agree that 3 has good muscle definition. I placed this class 2, 1, 4, 3.
I placed this class of heifer 2, 1, 4, 3. I placed 2 over 1 because its neck is longer and has more muscle definition. I placed 1 over 4 because 1 is deeper, thicker, and also halter broken. I placed 4 over 3 because 4 had more definition, thicker, and had more neck. 3 also had muscle definition though too.
Awesome, thanks. Heather, do you want to go next?
I placed 1 over 4 because it is deeper and I think has a nicer body. I placed 4 over 2 because she has a smoother stomach, and I placed 2 over 3 because she has a smoother stomach.
Lorelai, you're the next one up on my screen.
I placed 1 over 2, 3, and 4 because it looks deeper, longer, and it looks a lot better than 4, 2, and 3. Then I placed 4 in second because she also looks, I don't know how to say this, but her legs look a little longer than 2 and 3. Then I placed 2 in third because it looks deeper than 3. And then I placed 3 in last because it looks a little thinner, not as deep, and definitely not as wide as 2, 4, and 1, as I put before them. Thank you.
Awesome. I know there's a couple of people with their hands up still too. If you guys want to type out your reasons in the chat and send them to either myself or Kira, you can do that as well. Carter and Kenna, do you guys want to go?
I placed 1 over 2 because 1 has a longer neck than 2. I placed 1 first. 1 is halter broke. Good. He has good feet set up. Number 2 is a good standing tall heifer 2.
Awesome. We have time for one more. So Michaela, do you guys want to go?
I went 2 looks deeper than the others, and then 1 looks very strong. 4 has more muscular legs, and 3 because she doesn't look quite as strong.
Awesome. Well, guys, so that's all we have time for tonight. But if you didn't get to say any reasons, don't worry. We're going to work on more of that next week.
Awesome. And so just if you guys still have any other questions or want to keep reviewing your terminology of what we went over today, if you go on the 4-H website, under judging, you'll find the 4-H project guide. And that's where we pulled all our diagrams off of for this presentation. So you can go on there and look at our diagrams and also learn a little bit more about kind of what you are looking for with each animal. So if you still have some questions or want to keep practicing, this is a great resource to consider. So that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you again next week.